The official Vintage Guitar Magazine 2025 price guide has partnered with 33 of the top guitar dealers in the industry to provide the most accurate values for thousands of models. This includes electric guitars, acoustic guitars, basses, amplifiers, effects, mandolins, and banjos. Whether your instrument is an investment or simply a piece you enjoy playing, it's always helpful to know what it's worth. If you're checking out a guitar at your local shop and want to know its value before making the purchase, this guide is your go-to source for all the details. Available in both print and digital editions, you can have the guide right at your fingertips no matter where you go. Use code BUYGUITAR25 to receive 15% off the 2025 price guide when purchased directly from www.vintageguitar.com. Offer expires February 11th, 2025.
Hello and welcome to Buy That Guitar, presented by Vintage Guitar Magazine. I'm your host, Ram Tuli. This podcast is about the joy of guitar. That includes buying guitars, selling guitars, collecting guitars. We're talking vintage guitars, new guitars, used guitars, pre-war, flat tops, electric Spanish arch tops, custom shop guitars, limited edition guitars, basses, amps, effect pedals, lap steels, mandolins, banjo. If it has strings, we're going to talk about it. I spent most of my life studying the vintage guitar market. It's truly something I love and I'm passionate about. I can talk guitars all day, and I'm going to. Today, everybody, I got a special treat for you. I got Tom Guerra, the king of Stratocasters, is going to talk to me about Stratocasters. And won't you agree, Tom, that the Fender Stratocaster is the greatest guitar ever conceived and built by humankind?
I totally agree, although I will defer to the king of Stratocasters, to Jimi Hendrix.
Well, yes, he's the one that, I guess, kicked the door in for the rest of us, right?
Right. Yes. I'd be content with being a serf of Stratocasters.
Yeah. I have a list of what I consider the best Stratocaster players ever. And you're on that list for me. I think that you are one of the, wow. I just, anything that's good that's happened to me in the last 5 years, Tom, is because of you.
Well, thanks. I love the instrument and first fell in love with one many, many years ago, and it's really, you don't just play a Strat like you play a Les Paul. I mean, you really have to know the instrument, and you can get so many great tones out of it.
Right. And I'm not saying that if you're a Les Paul player that you don't, it's just easier to get to sound good with Les Paul. You have to work. You have to work at a Stratocaster.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And there's without a doubt, the Stratocaster is the most transparent guitar there has ever been conceived, because you think of, we always think of Hendrix, and then we think of like the 70s, we think of, Eric Clapton coming in with Brownie and Blackie. But it's really the 80s where the Stratocaster kind of really comes into its own, where most of us in our generation get to know that Stratocaster. And you think of all the different people who used a Stratocaster in the 80s and how no two sounded alike. The Roy Gallagher's,
100%.
The Stevie Ray Vaughan's,
Robert Cray.
Cray. Just everybody played it differently. And you think of Sultans of Swing sound. You have the Stevie Ray Vaughan in your face, blast, or you get the just the twang. You get the. So to me, the Stratocaster is something you really have to work at, and it's you. It's not the guitar. It's you who comes through in that instrument.
100%. I totally agree with that, and it takes a long time to kind of find your voice on the Strat, but it really becomes your voice versus, I think of like the classic Les Paul sound, and, think of like Cream, and you think of, people like Paul Kossoff and Jimmy Page, and they had similar sort of professional Les Paul sounds, but with a Strat, you could get wildly different variations. I mean, Hendrix's sound, Mark Knopfler, Richard Thompson, and all these guys sound so different and uniquely sound like themselves.
Right. You and I both graduated high school the same year. So I'm the West Coast version of you. You're the East Coast version of me. But you had far more success playing guitar than I ever will. You start out with the Dirty Bones band, right? Yeah,
I started out with the Bones in, I think it was 1982, and we were really kind of swimming against the tide with that band because we were playing, what one reporter said was grime and gristle rock and roll, and we were really in the MTV era. So we were playing stuff that sounded real raw and sounded like a combination of Steppenwolf and Creedence or something, against Don't You Want Me Baby and all that stuff on MTV. So but we kind of developed a decent local following and played a lot on the college circuit throughout New England, and it was a great experience, kind of like your first your first street gang that you're in. For those of us who live to be in multiple street gangs.
And then when do you form Mambo Sons?
The Mambo Sons were about, I think the Dirty Bones ended in about 1990, and then I played blues in a variety of blues bands in the 90s, and that at the end of the 90s, I formed the Mambo Sons, and that band was we were on a little record label, and that was back in the day when there were little record labels, and did that for 99 was our first album with Rick Derringer. Our last album was 2009, and that was a double album. And then we continued in 2009, the owner of the label passed away. So we didn't really record anything after that, but we continued to play, up until the last few years. I mean, we'll still do one or two shows a year. We're just not doing anything in terms of, new output or whatever. Since 2014, I've been doing my own solo records.
Would you say like this is probably the most prolific time in your life, songwriting? I think so. You are. I think. I mean, so. You always have something coming out, and
yeah. I did 5 solo records on CD from 2014 to 2022. And then in 2023, I was going to do another CD. I started writing a bunch of stuff. And people are like, don't do a CD again. Do singles, because that's the way people listen to music. And I kind of had a hard time with that initially, because I love listening to albums, But
right, our generation, that's the way we present our music.
That's our thing, right?
Yeah.
So I've been doing a single like every 3 months, and I do like it now because I can work on it and then promote it a little bit, and start working on the next one. And it is a good way of getting, if you have 10 songs, you can spread it out over a 2-3 year period. Versus if you release a CD,
right,
next week it's going to be old news, And with the last one I did, Sentimental Junk, in 2022, there was so much good stuff on there that I thought kind of got overlooked because we did it on the CD format.
Yeah, I just think your songwriting gets better and better with everything you put out. And I don't know if that's because you mature.
Well, I appreciate that.
We just kind of mature and we get better and better and more confident. But I think I love your albums because they're guitar dominated. Like today, that's not something that people like to do.
Yes,
it's hard to find guitar dominated music. And we grew up, everything was guitar dominated. And then all of a sudden it wasn't.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and the last couple I did were really rip-roaring guitar songs. And actually, the one I'm going to be releasing in about 5 weeks doesn't have a guitar solo on it. It's more, it's really different for me. It's got like a Tex-Mex vibe, but I really like the song. And it's got Christine Ullman as a kind of co-lead vocalist. She's from the Saturday Night Live band, and she's like a soul sister. I just love her, love her singing and everything about her, So I'm looking forward to getting that one out.
I think out of all your solo albums, I think they're all good. I love American Garden for some reason. For some reason, that one, it seems like, I guess in Trampling Out the Vintage too, they were really riff heavy. They were really riff heavy albums, and I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like doing the Garden too, because that's one of my favorites too, because right before that, I was working real closely with Kenny Aronson, who's been the bassist on every solo thing I've ever done. I actually played on the first Mambo Sons record too. But he and I were writing some stuff for the Yardbirds, because the Yardbirds were supposed to do a studio album produced by Jack Douglas, and we were all fired up, and we wrote a bunch of songs together. And at the last minute, they pulled the plug on it, which was really, really disappointing. But I took 3 of those songs and I put them on American Garden, and I love the way they came out on there. And Kenny was a big help on writing those.
I love John Butcher. I think is he on any other album besides American Garden?
Oh yeah, he's on he's on a couple, and he actually to this day, he was on the Sentimental Junk album. He and I co-sang a song called California's Got to My Girl, which I think is one of the best things I've ever released, which is very R&B feeling. And then he played the lead guitar on a song I released this summer called Television Dreams, and it's just a crazy guitar solo on it.
Yeah.
So, I just talked to him the other day. He's getting ready to release a new one, and I love the guy. I love his playing, but just as a human being, he's a really great guy.
Where do you record right now? Like, where are you doing most of your recording now?
I'm doing most of the recording in my little studio, which I call Casa del Sol, SOUL, and it's really an unlimited amount of tracks I can do, but I try to do something that that doesn't sound like way too heavily overdubbed. I mean, it's simple rock and roll stuff.
Right.
But I was able to get pretty decent sounds with all the guitars and amps that I have.
Are you doing the engineering and mastering yourself, or do you have somebody come in?
I'm doing the engineering and mixing, and I'm not mastering myself. I actually use a guy in Chicago by the name of John Scripp. He's got a company called Massive Mastering. Massive Productions, Massive Mastering, I think. And he's great. I love working with John. He's a real good guy too.
Today you can be as prolific as you want to be, as long as you don't get upset when you don't get your CD Baby checks every.
Well, I mean, it's amazing the checks we get these days. I mean, it's like the difference between one I got last year and this year is last year I could just buy the pizza, and this year I can actually get pepperoni on the pizza.
Yeah. Wow, you got a CD Baby check once a year. I'm lucky. We're lucky if we even here. I don't think we hit our threshold until I think every 4 years.
It's crazy now,
peanuts. And there's nothing you can do about it except just love the fact that you have a way of sharing your music, and that's how it is now.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I mean,
that's how it is.
I write because I have to. I mean, I get these ideas, and I love the creative process. Yeah, it's weird. When I was young, my whole thing was, live playing and doing gigs. And then when I started really getting into writing, and I still was doing a lot of live gigs, I was like, geez, I'm getting a lot more satisfaction out of the creativity of writing versus, schlepping your gear around for 3 sets a night. And that's still really, really important. But I think as I've gotten older, I just really, really enjoy the studio that much more,
Now, in the studio, I guess it's safe, because I look at a lot of your pictures that you put up. Mainly you got your Stratocasters, right? Yeah,
I mean, I got a bunch of Gibsons too. And I don't, on the stuff that I record, probably 75% of the stuff now is Strat. Sometimes I'll use, like on this last one, I used a Strat, but I used a piece of foam to mute the strings because I was doing a lot of arpeggiated stuff. But most of them are, probably more than 75%. Most of them are Strats,
Now, there's a secret. I don't know if anybody knows this secret that you told me, that your favorite Strat to record with is like a 71 or a 72.
Yeah, wow, you've got a good memory. It absolutely is. It's a 71 4-bolt, and the pickups are really not that strong. They're kind of low output.
Right.
But it tracks beautifully. I mean, it just sounds great recording it, and either clean or with a little bit of hair on the signal. And I love that guitar, I mean, I do play a lot of the older ones too, a lot of the pre-CBS stuff in the studio as well.
We're going to talk in detail about Strats in a little bit.
Yeah.
But I always thought there's people out there that say, oh, I record with Strat, and they say, oh, when you tell them it's a 71, they're like, why? I thought you were supposed to like 70s Strats. And you're like, well, as long as it's, there's some things that must be there. But yeah, I mean, I think that part of the secret of the greatness of the Strat is the low output pickups.
Yep.
I think, like the Telecaster is its own beast. It's a completely different guitar because of the pickups. But that Stratocaster is like a paint, like you're an artist painting, and you have these things with a Stratocaster that you don't have with any other guitar. It's 3 pickup. Normally when you have a 3 pickup, you're bothered by that middle pickup. but not with a Stratocaster. That thing is not.
No.
It's in the perfect spot. You got the Charlie Christian spot. You got that middle spot, which is perfect for overtones. And then you got that bridge pickup. And that bridge pickup is wired directly to the jack.
Right.
So you could kill, like if you're playing through a big 6L6 type tweed amp, you're going to blow that. That's made for that,
Yeah.
But it's just, to me, it's like, like I said, we're going to talk year by year with the Strats. But I just love the fact that I'll admit that when you came out with your tramping out with the vintage, I think that might have been the spark that got me, hey, I love that somebody recorded with just vintage gear. I'm going to do the same kind of thing. And that's why we make it in Dime.
And the cool thing about, the in-between tones that we talked about, are like the second or the 5 position. And I do, on my 71, I did put a 5-way in, but all the vintage stuff I have is just, a 3-way switch, and you can balance in between there. You can just get so many great different sounds by those in between, whether they're clean or dirty. And I love that stuff,
Yeah, and that's, you think like Robert Cray and you think of Clapton, that's kind of their sound, was that out of phase sound.
Yeah.
Cray's with the back, and then Clapton's with the front too.
Right.
And it's it's kind of cool how, like normally people would overlook that. Why would you bother with that? And it's just amazing that somebody can just, like it's a paintbrush and you're painting with it.
Right. And I mean, you put a little distortion on that too, and it's just, it's delicious. I love it.
Yep. It's just, scientifically, we can't figure it out, but it works, somehow.
Yep.
I want to ask about Rick Derringer. Are you still friends with Rick Derringer? Do you talk to him a lot?
Yeah, I don't talk to him a lot, but every couple of years we'll just, I'll shoot him a text or whatever and say, hey, how's it going? I heard you did this and I really liked it. But he was really, really great and supportive when we were doing that first Mambo Sons record, and really learned a lot from working with him in the studio. And he was very, very, to this day, is a phenomenal player. He is, Oh, yeah.
I think of all the stuff that he was on that nobody even knows about.
Right. And I mean, he's a guy who could do anything. I mean, he could hang with Les Paul and play jazzy stuff. He could do the real rock stuff and heavy stuff. So, yeah, a guitar player.
It's funny that, because I work for the Price Guide, I get a lot of email from people. People always think that, because so-and-so owned the guitar before them, that there's a premium on it, right?
Right.
And I would say that the most quoted person this belonged to, I don't know how many emails I get. Yeah, this guitar belonged to Rick Derringer. And I just laugh. And can you prove somehow that this,
right.
Somebody just told me that. And I'm like, well, I know somebody who knows him.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. And
I think he has more fingerprints on guitars out there, according to, it's like the 5,000 people that claim they have a 59.
Exactly.
Or a burst out of the 1,700 that were made.
Right.
There's 5,000 people claim they have it. Well,
exactly.
After that burst, there's also people out there who say, I got a Rick Derringer owned.
He has owned a ton of guitars too, but
I know that they've all slipped through his fingers and gone. And we know people that own Rick Derringer. Like the most famous, I guess, is the 59 that Binky owns.
Oh yeah, and that guitar, I played that guitar
which
quite
you've
a
played.
Bit. Oh,
and I think you said that's one of the best 59 Les Pauls you've ever played.
Yeah, it's true. It really is. And I've been fortunate to play a bunch of them, and there's something about that guitar that's just, it feels great, very, very comfortable. And I played Jay Giles' 59, and that was really a Survivor guitar, and it had been refinned, but that thing sounded great too. But Binky's guitar just, to me, that's really the guitar. That's the burst.
Yeah, definitely. So you're a prolific writer. You started at Vintage Guitar Magazine about 89-ish.
I was 98 actually. Yeah.
Or 98.
Yeah.
So I love when you do. I love your interviews and I love your album reviews. And because you hit it on the nose, you're a guitar player talking about a guitar album, a guitar dominated album.
Yeah.
And you see it from the point of view of the guitar player, not the music producer or the whatever. When did you what was the first article you did for VG? Do you remember?
Yeah, the first one I did for VG was Ronnie Earl, who I was doing a lot of gigs with. We were opening for him. And I was talking to Ward Meeker one day, just out of the blue, and I said, hey, we're opening for Ronnie Earl. Would you be interested in an interview? Because I spent the first couple of shows hey, how did you get this sound? Or I see you're playing a super reverb in the Strat. Tell me about that. And, oh, you've got a vibratone. So I really got into the gear, and we had just an awesome conversation. And I called Ronnie and I said, hey, would you mind doing this interview? And he's like, oh, that would be great. I'd love to. So he had just released he was about to release an album called The Color of Love, which is one of my favorite Ronnie Earl albums. And then it just started to snowball from there. And then, one day I was at a Starbucks. I turn around and John Hyatt is standing in back of me. And I'm like, John, how you doing? He's like, hey, how are you? I'm like, good. And I'm like, yeah, I'm Tom Guerra. I write for Vintage Guitar. He's like, oh, I love that magazine. I said, would you like to do an interview? He's like, absolutely. So we spent the entire afternoon drinking coffee and smoking cigars. And I don't even smoke cigars, but if John Hyatt wants to smoke a cigar with you, you do.
Yeah.
So we're just, BSing and, and I said, okay, let's set this thing up. So we set up, the time, and we did the interview, and it was great because I couldn't really, write about anybody that I didn't like. So I've been really fortunate to know some people who I really like, or meet some guys that are great guitar players, and they fascinate me. I love talking to them, and we love talking about gear.
Yeah. Talk about Ronnie Earl. Like, he was probably one of my biggest influences. When I think of why I play a maple neck Stratocaster, I always say, well, it's because the back of Layla, they had the picture of the thing, but it was really listening to the early Ronnie Earl, maple neck Stratocasters through super reverbs.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
That to me is a sound. Anson Funderburg also had that sound, and Jimmy Vaughn had that sound too. He was always maple neck.
Yeah.
And I was always prejudiced, like when I talk about Stratocasters, I always told people, I don't even, most of my collection, I didn't have a rosewood neck in my collection until about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I was all maple neck, and it was really a Ronnie Earl. And it was just the brightness of a late 50s, mid 50s Strat with that maple neck. It was just such a magical thing,
Yeah, absolutely.
Unbelievable.
And my first Strat was a 79 maple neck Strat. And that was the guitar I really learned how to play a Strat on. And of course, the thing weighed, I think it honestly weighed 12 pounds. I mean, it was ridiculous.
I think I think you told me that you dropped it and it bounced out of your hands and dropped back.
I dropped it on a concrete
right
floor.
Back in your hands.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I was like, geez, I feel bad for the floor, I mean.
Yeah. You try that with the Les Paul Jr.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And then that 71 we were just talking about has, in the late 60s, actually it was late 1970, they came back with the solid maple neck. This is before the 3-bolt, immediately before the 3-bolt. And it was really the first time since the 50s where you could play a solid maple neck Strat, not a maple cap, but a solid maple neck. Right. And I love that guitar because it has the solid maple neck on it,
And I like solid maple necks, but boy, do I love maple caps too.
Yeah.
And, but try finding maple caps. They're very hard to find.
They're hard to
find.
Yeah.
They're very, in fact, you'll pay $5,000 just for the neck.
Right. Right.
Never mind what it's bolted to.
They're very rare. And even the 4-bolt big headstock maple necks are relatively rare too. And they don't really command a big price. So I shouldn't be revealing this because people go run out and buy all of them. But yeah. And I mean, obviously the rosewood boards and I know we're going to talk about this, but they've got their own sound as well,
Right. And it's really, the one thing I think I've told you that my number one Strat right now is your old 1960 that you sold me, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
But that is my number one, and it's a 60 with a slab.
Big, nice.
And
slab.
My whole life I was maple neck until I got the slab. I got a 62 slab, and then I got your slab.
Yep.
And now I find myself playing that guitar more because maybe it's because I get older and older, I like to have a thinner neck.
Yeah, that's got a thinner neck on it. I remember that.
Thinner neck, and I think you can play a little faster or whatever. But I will say, I have a slab Telecaster. The slab Telecaster doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah.
That slab Stratocaster does amazing things for me.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of a thing. We'll talk about that in detail as we go.
Yep.
I wanted to, like, what's your amp, right? Like, what is your favorite amp when you record? Do you just use everything
boy.
you got?
It kind of everything I got. I mean, because it depends on what the song, calls for or whatever. I mean, I've used the Marshall 50. I've got a great model 1986 from 1970. That's the base model. And
that's a secret. People don't know that the base model is much cheaper.
Yeah, somebody told me Dwayne Allman used a base model, small box. Yep. So I can
or the PAs too. The 1917 PAs. Those are the same circuits.
Yep.
I mean, we shouldn't be telling people this stuff.
Right. No, and I mean, speaking about Marshall PAs, I have a PA 20 that is I've had for about 30 years. That is an incredible sounding amp that I use a lot in the studio. And when we did, I think it was the second Mambo Sons album, I sent a copy to Mitch Colby, who was at that time head of Marshall Korg USA. I said, Mitch, I just, want you to hear this because I think it's a great tone and you guys should reissue this amp or whatever. And I'm not taking credit for that at all, but they did reissue it about a year and a half later. And it became a big seller. I have a PA 20, but they reissued the lead 20, which is the same amp basically.
Right. Mitch Colby, one of the greatest guys, nicest guy ever. He'll give me hours. When I first started doing the guide, I needed to get the Marshall numbers fixed.
Yep.
Because they were kind of like lift. Sometimes it's just impossible to get data from Marshalls.
Right.
And so I sat. I was on the phone with him for hours, and we just went over every model.
Yep.
And I was wrong about so many things. Like I was so wrong about a lot of stuff because I just didn't know. And he was just so kind and he's really, he kind of has focused me too. Like whatever Mitchell Colby said about something and John Peden as well. Remember the two of them used to always work together. And those guys influenced me so much that I'm biased toward anything they have said. And if they didn't like something, I never liked it, even though I never played the thing. And you know what I mean? It's like, they just wide panel fenders. And that's why I don't have one wide panel fender in my collection. Is because Mitch Colby and John Peden and
Richie Fliegler.
And remember they just said, oh, this thing was underwhelming. They did a pro wide panel. And so I don't own one wide panel I have this huge Fender amp collection. Yeah. Not one wide panel because of how they said it just underwhelmed them. And I was like, I'm not even going to bother.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to bother.
Speaking about other studio amps though, I mean, I use my Mitch Colby, it's called a Colby DTB 50, dual tone boost 50. Quite a lot in the studio because it's a little, I use it with a 112 Celestion cab. It just freaking sounds great. And
is it closer to the 50-watt sound then?
Yeah, it is a 50-watt sound. Yeah. It's
okay.
A 26L6 amp or 2L EL34 EL34 6L. Geez, I should know this. But yeah, it's one of the two. Sorry, Mitch.
He's got that. Did you review his Dragon amp for him?
Yeah, I reviewed both the Sun Dragon.
Okay, I remember reading the Dragon amp, which that's to me, it's like I have room for it. I'm looking for it. I'm going to bring it home someday.
Right. Yeah. So he had the Sun Dragon was a perfect part by part reproduction of Jimmy Page's small 112 amp that was a Supro that he used on the first couple of Zeppelin albums, and then I also reviewed his Super Dragon, which was basically a blueprinted version of Page's 100-watt bass Marshall, which he used live on all great Zeppelin stuff. So that thing was that was an incredible amp. It's very unforgiving, though. It's not really a filthy, dirty toned amp. It's got a lot of clean tones. And if you think like when Page was doing those 12-string parts live on Song Remains the Same, it was loud but very clear, and that's how the Super Dragon is. Super Dragon's amazing. He and Perry Margolif were responsible for working directly with Jimmy Page on that, and amazing amp. They made a limited quantity, and they're just they're more than my car.
Well, let's transition now. We're going to talk about Stratocasters.
Sure.
You're one of the few guys I know that had a lot of Stratocasters pre-CBS because you basically started collecting them and playing them as a teenager. And you added to your collection. You thinned your herd out once, and I was the lucky recipient. I think you contacted me first and I told you I want that Candy Apple Red 60. Or not the Candy Apple, the Fiesta Red 60.
Oh yeah, yep.
And that like I said, that's now my number one. It hangs on the wall.
Oh,
It
that's
does not
great.
ever go back in the case.
Yeah.
But you had some great. I think the most famous Strat that you own, you never get to play because it's always being sent to a museum somewhere. Tell me about that Strat.
Oh yeah, that's the Howlin' Wolf Stratocaster from 1963. It's the Strat that he's famously pictured in those great black and white photos from Silvio's in Chicago, and there's a bunch of different ones of him playing the white Strat.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that guitar, and there was no tie at all to Howlin' Wolf, but I noticed on the pickguard it said Lil Bill, and it was sort of burned into the pickguard like if somebody had used nail polish or something and then taken it off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those celluloid pickguards are very, very susceptible to fire, but also chemical. So I'm like, Lil Bill, who's this? So this is in the early days of the internet. I think it was I used an Alta Vista search engine and put Lil Bill guitar, and a picture of a guy came up, blues guy playing a guitar that said Lil Bill on the pickguard. And I was able to get in touch with him. He was living in a nursing home down in Mississippi at this point. And I said, I think I've got your guitar. He's like, the white Fender? I said, yes. He's like, oh, that guitar is a great guitar. I played that, throughout the 60s. And, I got that guitar from Wolf. And I said, Wolf? Who? He said, Chester Burnett, Howlin' Wolf.
Marshall?
Right, yeah, right. So I'm like, Chester Burnett. And I said, oh, that's great. And I hung up the phone. I'm thinking, I've never seen Wolf with a Strat. So I contacted the Howlin' Wolf Museum, also in Mississippi. And I said, you know who Lil Bill Wallace is? Yeah, sure. We know Lil Bill. He said he used to own a Strat that Howlin' Wolf was originally the owner of. And he's like, oh yeah, the white Strat? I'm like, yeah, how did you know? He's like, oh, we got a ton of pictures. And they sent me the pictures. This is all through the U.S. mail, too, because this was kind of before people were using email to send, PDFs and JPEGs and whatnot. And I got the picture, and I remember holding the picture of Wolf up to the guitar. And, this was in 1964. It was a pretty new guitar, but there was one big chunk out of the lower horn. And, of course, I saw that chunk out of the lower horn of my guitar, and I got like a chill. I was like, this is Wolf's guitar. And then I had Hubert Sumlin authenticated as well. And Lil Bill's son, whose name is Wadada Leo Smith, who's a very popular jazz musician. I talked to him about it too, and he's like, oh yeah, what you don't realize was in those days, Wolf would come down to Mississippi and he'd stay at my father's house and they'd hang out there. So he didn't know if Wolf gave him the guitar or if Lil Bill bought the guitar. Lil Bill said he bought the guitar from him. So, but yeah, it's a cool story. And then Lil Bill was driving a beer truck because he kind of ran into some problems with his music career because he signed 2 different contracts and he was sort of blacklisted from music. So he was driving a beer truck to make ends meet. And one of the trips up to Chicago, he sold the white Strat, and I bought it from a guy who basically got that guitar from the pawn shop that he sold it from.
Right. I always think of, when I was stationed in Chicago for a long time. I remember just walking through pawn shops, back on Maxwell Street, back when Maxwell Street was still Maxwell Street.
Yeah.
And just saying, maybe I'll run into something. But you actually did. You actually found something that was pawned on Maxwell Street that was, had significance,
Yeah.
Great. So I always joke that you should keep that thing for at least a couple of months to play it, because every time I turn around, it's on loan somewhere.
Yeah.
Somebody else is looking at it. Eyeballing it.
I've coincidentally have been playing it quite a bit lately. And it was most recently out at the Fullerton Museum, the Fullerton Fender exhibit out there in Fullerton, where it was initially born, So they had it for about 6 months. But I figure it's cool. It's a cool guitar. I want people to see it. And, who knows? I mean, I'm just a caretaker for it. That's the way I look at it. I look at all my guitars like that too,
Yeah, that's the joy of, when we talk about Stratocasters, one of the things, I wrote a book about Stratocasters, and you wrote the foreword for it.
Yep.
And that was really that really helped me get into the, that really introduced me to the VG magazine gang, because Crown reviewed it, and you introduced me to Alan Greenwood.
Yeah.
And that was really, but it was really because, like I say, you're like my patron saint. Nobody ever heard of me until
honestly,
Tom did that.
they had asked me about the price guide, and I'm like, I know the guy for you. You don't want me. You want Bill. You want Ram. So, because you had already done such a deep dive on
right.
the price by year, so it does seem like a
and that was just
fit.
Because I'm a data idiot,
Right.
I love data, I might as well look at data that means something to me.
Yep.
And I remember when I was going to do a book in 2020 or 19, or I think it was 2019 or 2020. It was just going to be the history of guitar prices because I just keep all that data.
Yep.
And I sent you the book to review it, just to give you a peer review of it.
Yeah.
And you sent it back saying, I think you're wrong. I don't think you've missed something. The price of Stratocaster is just now going up because, for 10 years, 15, I think I even wrote in my Stratocaster book, the price I paid for my Candy Apple Red is probably never going to be worth what I paid for it. But that's just, I don't care. It's the joy of playing that guitar. And you told me, you're like, hey, I think there's something going on right now where the prices are starting to move again.
Yeah.
And so I went and I looked and I was like, holy crap, you're right, Tom. And that's when the book became, now's the time to buy that guitar because, because it was like all of a sudden, everything that had been undervalued was basically now moving again, was starting to pop. And this is even before COVID. This is even before COVID.
Right.
And it just started, it came alive right before then. And so I always credit you, like you were the one, I would have been a boring book. I would have been ridiculed.
Well, I have, not to the level of that you've kind of monitored from a data perspective, but I've been kind of, for the past 40 years monitoring the price of these things. And I remember, God, after 2008, was a great time to sell a vintage guitar to because the market kept going up. But after that, when we had the financial meltdown, the prices did take a real dive,
Mm-hmm. And
I thought, they were creeping up again right before COVID. I'm like, oh boy, they're going to take another dive during COVID. And they did just the opposite, as you know.
Right. And in fact, nobody believed that. That's what happened. We kept scratching our head. And it was funny because it wasn't until COVID that Stratocaster, like the high-end Strats and Teles, regained their pre-bubble values.
Yep.
We were 15 years of just doldrums going down and staying down. And now, the last 5 years, the price of everything has really been rising where it should have been, like where it would have been.
Right.
Right. So like, let's go through Stratocaster. Like you and I know Stratocasters, but a lot of people out there, they don't. The second season for this podcast is going to be focused on guitars. And I did Gretsch, going to do Rickenbacker. You really got to do the big five, like the ones that matter the most. And the one that matters the most to me is the Stratocaster. The collector, anybody who collects guitars should have at least one Stratocaster in their collection. Just because.
Or 50.
Yeah, like us. Because no two are alike. That's the craziest thing is that I can play 5 blackguards and they're all alike to me.
Yep.
They blow my mind the same way, but it's not like you're underwhelmed ever. Then you get to white guards, they're okay. But then you get to the late 50s Telecasters, you're kind of like, ooh, be careful what you say about that one. But then 60s come, whatever. But the Stratocaster, no two are alike. No 2 years are alike. No two made day by day are alike.
Yeah.
There's just something special about these things. And you really do have to own, I don't know. I'm not going to say you have to own one from every year.
Right.
But you really should have a maple neck from the 50s. You really should have you got to have a slab. I'm telling you.
Yep.
I was so prejudiced against slabs, but the slab just blows your mind. And then the veneer stuff, and we'll talk about that year by year. And we'll give we'll tell you what the current price is too, just in case you're curious, But everything starts in 54.
Yep.
That's when Forrest White arrives and things get really busy there on South Raymond Avenue. Leo basically wants to obsolete his Telecaster before his competition does. And he thinks he's going to do it with this Stratocaster. So everything he wanted to do with the Telecaster, but didn't have time because Randall just rushed it to market. He basically now has time to implement the things that he wanted to do originally with the Telecaster, but he's going to now put it into his new guitar, which is the Stratocaster. And that's when, in 1954, everything starts up. Stratocaster debuts.
Yeah.
They make 260 of them. in the first year. The earliest ones are different than the later ones.
Yep.
And there's minor differences. But by 1954, December-ish, 54, it's pretty much what you got was what you got for the rest of Stratocaster history.
I know.
Things don't change all that much.
Amazing.
That the thing is, it's amazing. Like the earliest Stratocasters, one thing we learned from David Davidson is that they all had to be sent back to the factory. They were just reps took them out.
Yep.
But they all had to be all had to be repocketed and refixed because the earliest ones, and they had the original parts that were the brittle parts, bigger parts, things like that. But nowadays, if you're going to be in the market for the earliest Stratocasters, you're going to be paying close to $200,000 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just plain, and that is the fastest growing segment as far as, value wise for a Stratocaster is 10% a year, doubles in value every 7 years. And especially the last couple of years, 5 years has jumped 150%, and it's harder and harder to find these. Although you can find them. You and I both know where you can get, there's 7 of them sitting on a wall somewhere.
Yeah.
No two are alike, beautiful ash bodies. They're all going to be great. I don't want to say that you won't be that happy with the earliest ones, but if you're a collector, you want that first one,
Sure. And I mean, if you look at, you lined up 554s, they all have slightly different contours, and
right.
It's because
they were just getting these things.
Yeah.
Yep, they were just getting there. And the heaviest ones, the earliest ones are the heaviest ones because they don't really, the ash is still very heavy.
Yep.
And it wasn't until like after the NAMM show in 54 that they can source the lighter swamp ash out of wherever it came out of, Tennessee or Kentucky or Florida, or wherever it came out of. And the earliest, in fact, I've played the very first Stratocaster. We both know who owns it. And for some reason, they don't want anybody to know they own it. That thing is heavy. That thing's 12 pounds, 11 pounds.
Is it really? Wow. I knew it was heavy. I didn't realize it was that heavy.
It is heavy.
Yeah.
And that's why, and people talk about the big difference between the Stratocaster and Telecaster in 54 was the contouring. There's a whole history of why they contour, and it's because everybody came back and say, well, this Telecaster is great, but boy, wouldn't it be great if you contour that?
Yeah.
And that's really why that upper bout now starts to stretch out, because you lose so much mass contouring it on the side and back and top that in order to balance it. But believe it or not, everybody thinks that Leo Fender came up with that double cut, but he actually came up with that for the precision bass.
Right.
And it was non-contoured, but he had to do that because the long neck was so unbalanced.
Right.
And they figured out that bout was there to help balance it out. Well, that was natural to do the same thing with the Stratocaster too.
Yeah. And it's just such sexy curves on that guitar,
It's like a woman. In fact, that's what Leo Fender said. He had the calendar girl sitting up on his desk, and he said, or on the wall, he said, I want to look at that. I want to think of a woman when I see that guitar.
Yeah.
The official Vintage Guitar Magazine 2025 price guide has partnered with 33 of the top guitar dealers in the industry to provide the most accurate values for thousands of models. This includes electric guitars, acoustic guitars, basses, amplifiers, effects, mandolins, and banjos. Whether your instrument is an investment or simply a piece you enjoy playing, it's always helpful to know what it's worth. If you're checking out a guitar at your local shop and want to know its value before making the purchase, this guide is your go-to source for all the details. Available in both print and digital editions, you can have the guide right at your fingertips no matter where you go. Use code BUYGUITAR25 to receive 15% off the 2025 price guide when purchased directly from www.vintageguitar.com.
Offer expires February 11th, 2025.
Cool. So 55, it starts, now we're kind of standardized. You get the hardtail starts showing up. So
Yep.
you could buy the hardtail for $20 cheaper. And this was because he figured, the Telecaster people probably aren't going to be into this tremolo arm thing.
Right.
Because that was kind of a new thing. That was kind of a synchronized tremolo type bridge. But the hardtail, they only make about 20% of the total were those hardtails. So they really didn't sell big. And I'm a big guy. I always talk about hardtails. It's harder to find a 57 hardtail than it is anything else. And, but it sells for much cheaper. It's like a lot of times it's 20% cheaper. But I tell you, you should have a hardtail in your collection, even if it's like a 60s hardtail.
Yeah.
It's a completely different animal. It gives you the sustain of a Telecaster.
Yeah, and I mean, I've actually got several Strats where I block the trem on it, which is in essence making it a hardtail, and I do that just because I need for tuning purposes,
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely.
Although it's amazing how in tune that Stratocaster does stay with that inertia bar block.
It does. I mean, if you know how to use it, I mean,
Yep.
it's different than a Floyd Rose. It will always be different than that, but it's
Yeah, you're not going to dive
amazing...
bomb and then get back to where you want, but you're going to
right.
But if you're playing the country western mellow, little here and there, it's perfect.
It's an amazing bit of machinery, little mechanism there.
We could go year by year what they do, but the truth is that the Telecaster was not obsoleted. It turns out that only 720 Stratocasters sold, and they shipped 1,027 Telecaster and Esquire in 55. He did not obsolete, nor did anybody ever obsolete that Telecaster. And the Telecaster is, one of the greatest things ever invented by mankind. Think about how everything made, 67 years ago, electronic has been modified, changed, adapted, except for the Stratocaster and Telecaster.
It's amazing.
Same thing.
I mean, can you imagine somebody driving a car today, or a GM coming out with a car that was based on a 1954 design? I mean, crazy.
And people loved it, and they were willing to just keep it the way it was. Another thing too, like cases are very important for Stratocasters.
Yep.
Earliest Stratocasters come in that we call the poodle case.
Yes.
Very hard to find those because they only made them for about a year.
Yep.
I see a lot of thermometer cases for Telecasters, very few of these poodle cases. But they quickly, by 55, they go to that center box one. It's a rectangle with the center box that collapses immediately.
Right.
But they're red lined. So I see people a lot of times will pay, I don't know, people are paying a lot of money for cases to get the right case. And I think the last time I saw a poodle case sell, they were at $5,000-$6,000.
For
when it was decent.
Well,
because
it's important. You want to have the guitar in its proper case.
Yep, and that's true of all vintage guitars. The case matters. You see a lot, even Dan Electros. I'm telling you, if you have a Dano 50s, it better be in that coffin case, or it's just going to lose. It's just not going to be worth what it says in the book it's worth.
Right. So what are we up to? 50, 56?
56.
Yeah, I love.
Now here's the first big change: is that Alder is now brought in. Because they can't get the swamp ash is just hard to source.
Yep.
And the alder body is now, you don't need to pour fill it like you do to ash bodies.
Yep.
And they don't have to spend a lot of man hours because alder is very plain. It's not, you don't have to worry about book matching the way the tops do for the ash bodies. But alder turns out to be a really serendipitous thing. It turns out to be the best tone wood you could imagine for a Stratocaster.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And it wasn't like somebody did a research project. It was just, I can get this. Okay, I'll get that. Nobody in their right mind used alder for anything in guitar making.
Right.
It's a furniture wood. But Leo Fender, the smartest guy in the world as far as sourcing things, he found great sources of stuff, and he gets there, and it turns out to be one heck of a great tone wood for the Stratocaster. Almost to the point, like, do you have a lot of ash bodies and alder bodies? Do you ever compare the two?
I have, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Do I own any ash body Strat? I don't own any ash body Strats currently, but they're, to me, like a hardtail, they're more telly sounding than Strat sound.
Right. They're not.
I found that.
I find that I love the alder body sound better. It just works better with the low power pickups and just the combination of things. It's really that the Telecaster is blessed by the thick neck and that thin ash body and that bridge that basically string through the bridge. That gives you 99% of that Telecaster twang.
Right.
But with the Stratocaster, the ash, to me, I don't find myself playing my ash body Strats as much as I do the alder body Strat, just because I get a better Strat tone.
Me
out of
too.
That alder body.
No, totally. And there's a little bit more roundness, I think, of an alder body.
Yeah, and it just seems to work perfectly. And at 56, we start getting the neck profile start being more pronounced. You start getting into that V.
Yep.
It'll get crazy by 157-ish when they become very sharp, and then they go back down. But I don't know. A lot of people like those V necks. Do you care one way or another, or do you like the D necks?
To me, I kind of I play based on the way the guitar feels. So, versus being demanding, I need to have a perfect C neck, or I need to have a perfect V neck. I just pick the thing up, and if it feels good, I play it. And I've got a December 1957 Strat. Great. Well, the body is labeled December 57. The neck is actually 158, so January 58. And it does have, it's kind of what I would call a post V. It's a little bit rounder than a V neck. It does have a little bit of a V, but it's, it does have bigger shoulders than a V. And that's one of my favorite Strats. You've probably seen a picture of it. It's just massively beat up. And when I got it, it actually had 2 coats of paint over. And one day I was playing it and I rubbed some of the kind of the finish off, and I'm like, oh my God, there's an original sunburst under this. So I spent about 2 weeks. I mean, carpal tunnel, syndrome is, based on some of these, trying to clear, 1 centimeter of finish off of a Strat while, keeping that or retaining the original sunburst. And I was able to get just about all the paint off the face of it. The back was already worn pretty bad, but that's a great looking guitar, and it plays great. I mean, the pickups are just really hot on that particular one. I consider that more of a 57 than a 58,
Yeah. And one thing about the V-necks is, like the custom shop will make 57 Strats and things like that. Nothing will ever have the kind of V-neck that a real 57 Strat had.
Right.
There's no way you would, because it's so, I love playing my 57 Hardtail's got a very, very sharp V-neck. I played lead guitar on that. I will not be able to make bar chords for very long.
It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah. You'll be very tired. That's a cowboy chord guitar right there. And that's the thing is like you find yourself, you don't play rhythm guitar with these sharp V-necks, and nor will the custom shop ever make something that was like a real V-neck that came out in 57, just because the market wouldn't like it. Today's guitar player wouldn't like it.
Right.
It's just a very difficult neck to play. Not as bad as the blade necks from the 60s, 61. That's the worst. But the V-neck is a definitely, it takes getting used to, and you probably won't find yourself playing a lot of bar chords or rhythm guitar type stuff.
They're not terribly comfortable,
Yeah. And through 57, we also start getting the ABS plastic knobs and pickups start to replace the what we call the polystyrene. But they falsely call it Bakelite. We call it the Buddy. If you look at the Buddy Holly pickups, where the pickups are rubbed off the tops because
they're all smashed up.
Playing, and anybody who's got the original Bakelite Stratocasters also got cracked pick guards, and everything's cracked and brittle. They go to this ABS plastic in 57, and that there's a price point change there. People, the prices will change there.
Yep.
And then in 58, we get the D-neck starts coming back. Much easier to play D-neck, but it's going to thin as the years go.
Yeah. And we do have in 58 the introduction of the 3-tone sunburst too.
Right.
Which is,
and
which
57,
is a cool
they start,
thing,
right. And I guess it was in late 56, they start dyeing the middle yellow. They don't paint the yellow. They now start dyeing it. And then they go ahead and they use the ambulin dye for the third color, which there's a lot of sunlight is going to just fade that away. And it's just going to soak into the wood anyway. And that's why a lot of the earliest 3 colors are 2 colors now, because that red kind of faded away.
Right.
And there is a thing but the 58 is going to be cheaper than 57, and it's because of that third color. And that's just kind of it's just an era change, another era
Right.
change.
I think people think of, 50 Strats as being 2 color for the most part.
And I always ask people, like, why is there such a price difference between a 58 and a 57? And it's really, they say, well, it's that third color. And to me, it's like, it looks beautiful, but it's like it's going from white guard to black guard, same thing. So, and then also the tweed case now becomes orange lined. Be mindful, if you got a 57 Strat and you're looking for the right case, make sure it's the red lining, not the orange lining, because orange is 58.
Right.
You'll get you'll get laughed out of the guitar show when you try.
Right. And even though the one I was talking about is a January 58 neck date, it does have the original red lined case, because it's I think that change sort of coincided with the introduction of the third color too. These are, these are not like January 1st, something happens. They use their stock and, we're going to try this next. And then April of the next year, something else changes,
Right. And a lot of times the changes occurred for NAMM, for summer NAMM.
Exactly.
Is when the new stuff, when you think of a 55 Stratocaster, it was a 55, the 56 didn't really show up until the summer of 56.
Right. Right.
Like if we're talking about big changes, big model changes. 59 is a seminal year now for Stratocasters, because we now go to that slab, that flat milled piece of rosewood that's just stuck on there.
Yeah.
And the rumor is, and it's probably true, that Leo Fender hated seeing his Stratocasters on black and white TV with all the smudge marks.
Right. Right.
And And anybody who's played a maple neck knows that because you play it and you play it and you play it, it gets dirty. And if you don't clean it every day, pretty soon that nitro starts rubbing off. And then pretty soon there is no nitro in the finger marks.
Yeah.
And you could always tell what first player he was. Was he a cowboy chord guy or was he a lead guitar player? Just depends on where the wear is. Just know that you're going to wear that neck away. Even if you think about it, within 3 years, those necks were worn. You think about 57, the 55s already had their necks worn out.
Right.
And Leo Fender just assumed everybody just replaced the neck. They're not going to refret it. They're just going to buy a new neck.
Right.
It's like
and we've seen a bunch of them with replaced necks too from the factory, and you can always tell because they'll do more than replace the neck. Sometimes they'll do something with the pick guard or whatever, and so we see all that. And I mean, the other big change in '59, of course, was going to the green guard, the 3-ply
and
guard.
It's funny, like the green guard is probably the most beautiful. When you think of Stratocasters and you think of like the 3-color with that green guard, is there anything more beautiful than that?
Oh, love it, yeah. And I love how on the early ones there were multiple screw patterns. They hadn't really nailed that down for probably the first 6 months.
And there's a lot of hybrids out there. I got 9 screws, I got 8 screws, I got 12, and people have tried to, that's a selling point. This is so rare. It's got the extra screw,
Right.
But the truth is also the thing is because they go to the rosewood slab, they now have to take out the black markers and they put in what they call clay dots. But these things aren't made out of clay, are they?
No, they're not. They do kind of look that clay brown color.
Because they turn color. They turn into a clay color. But I think Kevin Borden told me they were just punched out floor tiles.
yeah. That's basically what they were, I mean.
I love that green guard. I love the look of a green guard. I love the smell of a green guard. You know what I mean? It's just.
They definitely have that vapor rub.
In fact, that's how you told me. That's how you tell if they're fake or not. You just scratch the back.
Yeah.
Scratch the back of it, and if it doesn't. But the thing is, too, if it didn't shrink, it's going to have to shrink. Yeah. Because they shrunk.
They all do.
And they all do. So if somebody's out there trying to show you something online, and that green guard, it's greenish, minty looking, but it's not shrunk. It's a fake.
Yeah.
Fake.
Yep.
And then, of course, the necks become even thinner. They start adding that metal spacer in between the string clip and the peg head.
Yep.
Like I said, that green guard era, it doesn't last very long, but I think they're just beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
And as we say, the Stratocaster now has 11 pick guard screws.
Yep.
And then another cool thing is that they now put the shield underneath the whole thing.
Yes.
You know why they did that? Is because the Dan Electro people were making fun of them, but they were hanging up a Stratocaster next to a fluorescent light and the thing would just howl. So Fender said, screw it. We're gonna put the shield underneath the whole thing.
And that was a Dan Electro selling point, totally shielded,
Yeah.
Versus that was probably a jab to the Strats, partially shielded, who knows?
Yeah. But it's nice. In fact, a lot of times you'll see this metal shield sticking out from underneath the thing because the green guard is shrinking. You'll see the undercoat, as they say. That
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and then they start routing the bodies differently, just to add that extra screw hole. Yep. And that's kind of like people fake that, and you get caught that way. People, they try to, they try to pass off something before that with the wrong body, and you could tell right away because it's been routed for that shoulder.
Right, it's got that little shoulder there for the extra screw hole,
Yep, and then you get the Fender case now changes. You can now introduce the brown Tolex case to go with all the brown Tolex amps. Because the Tolex salesman could sell a lot more Tolex brown it is.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and then you get the Stratocaster. This is where 1960, I think, is when they start really becoming beautiful colors. Because they use the less photoreactive dye, the red dye.
Yep.
The red is now much brighter, and these early 60s stuff just pop. They pop. And you can also see that the amber brown by 61, the amber brown is now changed to black. So the third color isn't really, and I think one of the most beautiful 61s we've ever seen is Binky Phillips.
I was just going to mention that.
It's got the black edges, and it's got the red is like beautifully done.
Beautiful blend on it too. I said to him, I said, this is more beautiful than a custom color as far as I'm concerned.
In fact, I agree that that with the green guards, I think that the 3 colors with that pop that have the black are without a doubt the most beautiful Stratocasters ever made.
Yep.
No doubt about it. And then 62, we start seeing the bodies are now This is where the fakes come in for they start using the paint stick.
Yep.
And this is where you start catching the fakes. People now can fake this. The neck screws also become fully threaded. The rosewood now becomes less and less flat milled. It's now curving and curving until about 63, where it's now what they call the veneer.
Right.
And then you also start seeing the third patent number finally goes on the Strat head. And it's you got to be mindful. People are always trying to sell you stuff, mix and match, and sometimes they don't catch the fact that they have the wrong number of patent numbers on the Stratocaster they're trying to pull off to sell. So you got to know that. You got to know the patent numbers, which ones, when they show up. They have 2 until the third one shows up in 62. And also now the brown Tolex now has the reddish orange lining. So,
Right.
And then we get to 63, which I think are our favorite Stratocasters for us that are born in 63.
I totally believe that. And I think that's when they really nailed the
everything
as
is
far as I'm
perfect
concerned,
now.
the best neck too, Yep.
And so these now have the veneers on them, and everybody says they sound better. Like I told you though, that I love that slab, but I think these 63s, they finally got it all working. Everything is clicking, all cylinders are firing.
Yeah.
That's when you start seeing the heel stamps now. Stratocaster's number 2, Telecaster number 3, and Jaguar's number 1.
Right. Yeah. And they're not, it's not the day of the month. We can tell people that because I'll see I'm selling my Stratocaster. It was built on, exactly. 2nd of December. Really? Come on, man. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you the truth, man. When I bought my Candy Apple Red, it said 2 December 63. I was born December 1st.
Wow.
I said this was made the day after I was born. And then I realized no, it was actually made.
Well, that's still cool to have a guitar of the month you were born.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing is also very important is Stratocasters very seasonally. They were manufactured seasonally, so you'll find that the bodies were always made months before the necks were made, before they were joined.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And a lot of that time you'll find, I don't know how many people I know that have 57 Stratocasters, but the body was made in 56. It has the 56, 10 or 11, 56. They take that long winter break, and then they come back in March, sometimes February, because now they start gearing up again. And you'll see, I don't know, I see a lot of 63 Stratocasters, 163, 263, 363, where the body was made 6 months, 8 months before.
Yep.
They stacked them and packed them.
And that really happened. I was going to say it really happened in 66, where they made a ton of them, and that went really into, I know we're going to talk about 67, which is a really interesting year for the Strat. But
Right. And so the thing about the 60, like maybe Stratocasters, not so much, but Telecasters, very few made in 63 because so many were overproduced in 62.
Exactly.
The jazz bass was overproduced. So my 63 Telecaster actually has a slab board on it because it was a 62 neck. They didn't put it together and didn't get a stamp plate until the 63 sold, but everything, that's kind of the thing. And for some reason, the 12th fret dot markers get moved closer in.
Yes, that's another.
And
63.
People get caught making fakes, by not being mindful of the spacing. So that's another thing you check for the fakes. You check that spacing.
Right.
And also another thing is.
Yeah, go ahead. I know what you're going to say.
Is that pickguard screw changes. Yeah.
Right. That's a big one.
How many people buy that I need a green guard, and they buy the wrong one. They buy the one made before 63, and the screw holes in the wrong place.
And I think that happened probably June or July based on what I've seen. I have seen June Strats with the screw hole kind of in the middle, and I've seen July Strats with it down closer to that middle pickup rather.
63 is actually my favorite case. This is the white with the brown ends. This was used so short time, but they're the most beautiful. If you can get a 63 and it comes in that white Tolex case, that's a huge bonus. Yeah,
and I think too that was another mid-year change too, because I've got two 63s that have the brown case, and then I've got one from November that had the white case too. So
right, and I believe that was because they stopped making the white Tolex amps. They had changed to black Tolex in 63 at that time, and they had all this white Tolex left over, and that's why you saw that.
Probably, yeah. That makes a lot of sense, because that's a smooth Tolex.
Just to get rid of the inventory of the white Tolex.
Yep.
Everything is black Tolex now from then on.
Yeah.
After that. 64 now we're kind of coming up to the transition era now.
Yeah.
Your 64 is still considered pre-CBS. because it still has the pre-CBS things. You still have clay dots, but they do change to perloid in 64 in the summer.
Yep, right.
Now, here's the biggest change between a 64 and a 63 is your pickups. They're no longer scatter wound.
Yep.
They also change from enamel-coated wire to old school, the form bar is now, they're using enameled only on Stratocasters.
Yeah.
I thought Telecasters, but no, Telecasters still use the form bar coated wire. But now they also start dating the pickups now. They don't date the guitars.
Right.
They start dating, they stamp the bottom of the pickup, and that's why you immediately go to a gray bottom because you couldn't see the date with a black stamp and a black. So that's why when we talk about black bottom pickups, we're talking 63.
Yep. I have 64. Seen some early 64s with black bottoms, but with yellow ink on the date of the pickup too. Yep.
Or they're written with a pen in yellow.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. And so and then you'll see like the gray bottoms, these really are a different pickup altogether. They kind of have a completely different, tighter wrap now because they're machine wound with a counter, and the counter is now precise. There's no more scatter, as we say, and that kind of changes the way 64 Strats change. Different ball game, as they say. It's still good. We like it. We like it. And then, of course, people that collect also got to be mindful of Clusens. They change a lot. They go from deluxe to double line. So you have to know what year was what to see if somebody's been playing games with your Clusens on. People often don't know. They don't mind the single line to double line transition, which happens in 64 when you go to double lines.
Yeah.
And they also change to a metal spacer to a nylon string tree spacer. They go from metal to nylon. And we start seeing the transition decals now. A fourth patent number's added. So the thing about 64s is, I don't know, we talk about pre-CBS and post-CBS. As long as it has the small peg head, I think you can get away with saying it's pre-CBS, even if it has that transition logo on there.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because I think you're seeing that well into 1965 as well. And although they did get rid of the green guard around that time, but it was, I think that designation of pre-CBS and post-CBS is sort of characterized by small headstock.
Right, and green guard. In 65 they do change to plastic, which is, man, how boring. But that's, people, it was just too hard to make the damn thing. And now you got to make 10,000 more guitars a month, whatever.
Yeah.
So another thing is that you get the F plate, the F on the back plate. And that really, I think that's also the kiss of death. If your 65 has that F stamp on the F plate or on the back stamp plate, that's considered post CBS, and that's
less desirable.
But it sounds the same, people. It does sound the same.
Yeah.
So also the thing is, the color now looks different because they start spraying the yellow back on again. They no longer dip it. They now put the yellow, and that's where you get that bullseye. You think of that 65, 66 bullseye, where it looks like a bullseye. It could be really crazy by 66.
Right.
And some people don't like that. That's where the three color kind of loses a lot of its magic to people, is when it's too sharp. That yellow transition is too sharp. I don't know. I don't know if I like it or don't like it. Because by 66,
it's kind of a period piece. I think, you can look at it and say, oh, that's a target burst or a bullseye burst or a clown burst, they call them. And they're still Strats. They're cool, And
sometimes we're going to talk about the 66s a little bit. But to finish off, in 64, they also changed to the black Tolex. They ran out of white Tolex, and now it's just a black Tolex case.
Yep.
You can't fake this. It doesn't have the Fender logo snapped on it.
Right.
Can't fake this. You can't break it off and pretend that's the hardest case for people to find.
Right.
Are those late 64 cases that have the no logo, as they call it.
Right.
Period correct. People are always looking for these black Tolexes with no logo.
Yeah.
So, and now you think, here's where the big change happens, where all of a sudden CBS is now buying secretly, but now everybody knows what's going on. And you now have 600 people working there. Crazy. They now move into all the big buildings, and production rises 30% a month for next 12 months. So that's
amazing.
Yep. So like I say, 65.
That's truly big business at that point,
Yeah. Now it's like, who cares? There's nobody shouting quality on the line. It's all, let's do this, let's do that, get it to the stores. People are buying guitars. So, and here we see the fifth patent number shows up.
Yeah.
And then, of course, 66 is now total post-CBS, because you get what's called the big headstock starts showing up.
Right.
And 66 is also, production increases 45% in the whole factory, but it's all focused on other things. It's not Telecasters and Stratocasters.
Yep.
It's everything else. It's Jazzmasters, it's Jaguars, it's everything. Fender's the first to get rid of Brazilian rosewood, too. 66, they start phasing out and bringing in Indian rosewood. So you start finding the lighter rosewood necks now, which, I don't know, it doesn't cause as much heartache as the big headstock does to people.
Right. And they must have made, I don't know what the numbers were in 66, but they must have made a ton of them, right?
Yes, because they only made 55 in 1967.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's what Barney Roach told me. So if you have a 67 Stratocaster, you have something that's rarest Stratocaster ever made. One of them.
Yeah.
And you think like in 66, they changed 2 to 13 as the deck code.
Yeah.
Because that means somebody's talking about phasing this thing out.
Right.
It's not selling them. Nobody's buying them. Everybody's buying Gretsch's and Rickenbackers or Jaguars or Jazzmasters. They're not buying or Mustangs. Actually, Mustangs were the biggest. By 66, Fender's got a back order of 1 million units of Mustangs. That's what everybody's buying. And that's where they're focused.
Yeah. I had a great 67 that had F tuners on it, which are later, transition logo, gray bottom pickups, yellow and blue wiring. And it was a really cool guitar. It was a great guitar.
Yep.
And a friend of mine wanted it, so we put together a deal, and he's got it now. But it was a cool guitar, definitely.
And the thing is, like, they now make Fender tuners. They don't, Klusen's gone, you know.
Right.
Forrest White had a fight with them, with the guys. They wouldn't adapt to something. And so he said, we'll just make our own. So Shaler starts making F tuners. And you see that's kind of like the big changes start happening once Shaler's F tuners come on. Cloth wires now changes to black and white plastic covered wire. The polyvinyl chloride is now the wiring. There's where we go into this is where it all changes, people. We now change to a polyurethane finish. And boy, does that kill the mojo of a good Strat? Kinda.
Yeah, it's a stickier feel to it, you know.
And as the years go on, it gets thicker and thicker to about 73. You're like, what
the
heck is this thing? You can't even move your hand. And they changed to that black logo, because now CBS owns everything on TV. Now has to have the big logo so you can see it's a Fender, even though everybody knows it's a Fender. But they want you to see that big black logo, Stratocaster. But the cool thing is, by 68, the patent numbers start going down. Fender should have been paying attention, because once those patent numbers expire, guess what? But so 69, we go back to the one-piece maple necks. Goodbye maple caps. I love maple caps.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to know that everything will always have that skunk stripe on the back now. I don't think people realize it.
Right.
I mean, even the Rosewoods have the skunk stripe, because they just do it the same way across the board, across everything.
Yep. I'm sure it's cost purposes, right?
Yep. And the polyurethane finishes just get ridiculous, And then 1970, we're down to one patent number, Fender. You better be paying attention.
Yeah.
And 71 is now where it all kind of comes apart for Stratocaster lovers.
Yeah.
We switched to 3-screw. But the truth is, that's 3-screw neck. There's nothing wrong with it, right?
Yeah.
You'd never know.
I mean, even in 71, too, you wouldn't. But the other change that happened in 71 was the beginning of the year, they were still using that big black thick logo with synchronized tremolo.
Right.
And then by the summer, they kept the big black logo, but they dropped the with synchronized trem off of it. So that's another sort of transition thing.
Right.
I've got one of each, and the one that I have without the with synchronized trem is the neck date is August 71. So it really was one of the last 4 bolts, I think.
Does that one have the Mazak bridge?
No, it didn't. They both have the traditional stamp.
Because by the late 71, you start seeing this Mazak. It's no longer stamped steel.
Yep.
Like I remember reading Robin Trower when he made his signature model. He didn't want that, even though he used the Mazak bridge on a lot of that early Trower stuff.
Right.
He always preferred that stamped steel. We all do. To me, it's missing something magical. That stamped bridge is just. But late 71, you get the Mazak comes in. They're just die cast. And they don't even contour these things. Like you look at the 70s, mid 70s, they're not even contouring these things. It's very, very underwhelming now.
Right. And the other thing that grows, and I've seen this firsthand, is the gap in the neck pocket. I mean, I've seen some where you look at it in a picture and it's so prominent you could probably put a quarter in between the neck and the neck pocket, Yeah,
and they start squaring the pickup routes now. There's nothing fancy in there. They're just And then of course the polyurethane stuff is crazy. And this is like where we say this is really where it all kind of ends for us Stratocaster lovers. But I don't know.
Right.
Nowadays, people are paying a lot of money for 72, 73s if they're custom colors.
Yeah.
72, you get that second butterfly because now everybody's using super slinkies and the G and D strings now need to be held down.
Exactly.
I'll see people with the wrong necks because they have 2 string trees on there and they're trying to sell that as that's not right.
Right.
And then 73, you get they start putting the black parts on there. And for some reason, the market doesn't like black parts. You lose quite a bit of money. We always say if you got the natural with black parts, you might as well just hang it up on the wall.
Yeah.
So,
and I think, the other big change in 74, and I've owned 74s both ways, is the first batch of the 74 had the staggered pole pickups. And then by the end of the year, they've gone to the flat. And that's sort of a turnoff for a lot of people.
Yep, and that's the thing is, I think that's where I stopped even talking about Stratocasters when they flatten out.
Yeah.
So let's go back and let's talk about prices because people listen to this, they want to know prices. So yeah, we talk about the earliest ones are about $200,000 now.
Yeah.
And then we talk about like the mid 50s maple necks. Those are now 55 and on up. People are paying $56,000 for these things.
Mm-hmm.
You get to the late 50s, they're now 42 and up. Remember how the late 50s, they were like 30,000 for many, many years. And now you're going to pay about 42. And then, of course, you get to the slabs. Those are 36 to 40.
Yep.
The veneers drop about 5,000. You get about 32,000 now for a CBS veneer. And then here's where the big drop, CBS era, like a nice 67, well, not a 67, but a 68, is 18,000 now. Almost $20,000 for the Strats that nobody really was paying a lot of money for originally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you get into the 4 bolts, $12,000 on up, And then as soon as you get to that 3 bolt, just a regular Stratocaster is about $4,000 to $5,000 now.
Yeah. So value is about half of it, huh?
So, and we're not even talking about custom colors and stuff and Mary Kay's and stuff.
Right.
Mary Kay's, you're going to pay over $100,000 now for most of them.
Yeah.
Custom color Strats from the late 50s are impossible to find, but you're going to pay 85 up. Blonde Stratocasters now, 75 up for a lot of the, blondes. They're not hard to find, but people want them.
Yeah.
I happen to think that the blonde with nickel is better looking than the blonde with gold, but that's because I own a blonde with nickel.
Nice. And that's an ash body too?
Yeah, ash body, but like it does not sound as good as my other Stratocasters. And it doesn't sound like a Stratocaster, like what you think.
Interesting. Yeah.
But then you get to like...
Now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, as I say, it's just a different beast, as they say.
Yeah. So the thing I was going to mention is, so what are you seeing now for, in the old days, refins were 50% of the sales price, but I believe I'm seeing that. No, that's going up, huh?
I'm not going to say you have to pay about 70% of the price, but the rare color, nowadays it's back to rare colors. So you'll see everybody refins and you don't really see people refinning in candy apple red or white.
Right.
They're going for the
Fiesta.
Yeah, they're going for the ones that matter. Fiesta, Sonic Blue, Daphne Blue, Surf Green, Seafoam Green. Those are the ones people want. So everybody is refinning. You'll see that a lot of refins on the market, and you're paying a lot of money for refins. You're no longer paying half. Yeah. You're not paying half anymore because it's the wood that matters, and everything is right on it. Right. It's clean otherwise.
Yeah. Well, that is the operative phrase, everything is right, because, I've seen many out there with like changed pots, refin, changed pickups, refin, changed bridges. But if you can get something that is fully original with the exception of the body finish, the 70% I think is a great value, and it's a great way for people to get into a vintage Strat.
And you can actually play it. You're not going to be scared of knocking it against something. Right. And people don't realize this. You know that Strats had their own pot codes? Yes, I know that. But nobody else does. And that's another way you can detect the bogus ones, because you'll see something that's been cobbled together online with a 1963 pot code, but the part code is not the correct code. I'm like, nope, that's maybe a 63 pot, but it was probably out of a TV set or an amplifier or something, but not the guitar, because they have that 70 dash. I think it's 2125 pot code. That's another thing. Let's talk about fakes, because people get fake. I tell people buy the refin because it's been refinned anyway. Yeah. Unless you're getting it from somebody that we know that's trustworthy. Right. It's been refinned in the 70s. It's been done right, and it's been lacquered right. It's going to be It's going to be black lighted properly now because they're going to use a non-plasticine lacquer. But the pot code is the one that gets people because they don't realize, Right. They get that, or they pull the back plate off a Duo Sonic. Exactly. A 57 Duo Sonic that's got a dash. Yep. And they put it on something, but they weren't mindful about, something, the pots, or they weren't mindful of the color, or or that hip joint, inside on the routing.
Yeah.
I think Strats are the most faked. Wouldn't you guess that? It's because the market is so crazy and people are paying so much for custom colored Strats.
Absolutely.
That those are the most faked. It's almost like the cheats have gotten really good at this.
They have, and I think it's because there's a lot of documentation out there about the specifics underneath the pick guard, so you see people doing certain things. And
right.
But I mean, I can go on, one of the two big online sites, every day of the week and click through 10 refin Strats, and 5 of them there's something really wrong with them,
Mm-hmm.
So caveat emptor.
Yeah. And that's why I say, like Vintage Guitar Magazine, Vintage Price, we have our list in the front of who we trust. These are the people that are my advisors. They give me their sales reports every month, what they sell. But these are the only guys I would buy from. Like if I was gonna go get a custom color, there's only like a handful of people I'd go to now. I certainly wouldn't buy something hand unseen,
Right.
And a lot of the people are honest.
I mean, there's some.
A lot of people are on. A lot of these dealers are honest. Say, I don't know if this is a refund or not.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how many things I bought from Harvey Moltz where he said, I don't know if this is a refund or not. I think it's real, but I can't guarantee it. So I'll sell to you for the refund price,
Right. Well, that's kind of what they've got to do at that point too.
Yep.
And if they don't, then walk away because
right.
It becomes your story,
Absolutely. Well, Tom, this was fun. This was a lot of fun.
This has been great.
Is there anything that we should share? What should we tell people out there that have never played a Stratocaster? And it's,
I think it's, find a Strat player that you really like, tone wise, and then try to go after that. I mean,
yeah.
As you and I have discussed in the past, one of my big Strat influences was Rory Gallagher, and
absolutely,
I think it's at this point it's a subconscious thing. And I had somebody bought one of my singles recently, and they said, "Oh my God, I can hear Rory Gallagher all over this thing."
Yep.
I'm like, I guess you're right, and I'm like, yeah, that's in my DNA. That's in my Strat, sound quest, and and so I mean, I think,
and that's another example of why that slab, that 62, 61,
yeah,
it's a very unique flavor,
Yes, it is. It is.
Ronnie Earl, that's or early Clapton when he was using the Brownie or Blackie.
Yeah.
That's that maple neck sound. But that Roy Gallagher, that's a slab, and he only played one guitar the whole time.
I know.
And can you imagine that thing was found in a ditch? Remember that somebody found it in a ditch or something?
Oh yeah.
And they took it back, and I love that thing.
I just did right after the auction, his number one Strat sold for over $1 million US. Right after that, I did a radio show on Rory, and we covered a lot of the auction stuff, and it was amazing how many people just have such a reverence for Rory, all over the world too.
Oh yeah, and he's unlike anybody. Like how you can't compare him to anybody else.
No, you can't.
Even though he's playing blues, you're like, oh, he's playing blues. But like his Deuce album, I tell people, everybody should have Deuce as a must listen to album.
Yep. Yeah.
Because there's something going on there that you can't even sit down with a guitar and try to play along with it.
Right.
It's like you can't figure out, is he tuning weird? Is he detuned? Is he open detuned? Is he like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
It's just insane, and he isn't. He's just playing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Good stuff.
Well, I think people will. If they have never played a Stratocaster, I think this will entice them to go and at least play one.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You can't do that Jimi Hendrix chord on. It won't sound right on any other guitar. I'm sorry. It's got to be that.
Right. Won't sound right on a Les Paul. That's for sure.
You got to have that 25.5-inch scale length, and you got to have that open E. It's not going to work on a Les Paul. You can't do it. It will not work. It's missing whatever it is that made that magical. So we talk about that all the time. It's got to be. You got to.
And we love it. Yeah.
So, Tom, I am so thankful. This was a great way to spend.
Oh, Ram, it's been great. I mean, I could spend all day, and we spent half of the day talking about this stuff, which is totally cool,
Yeah. And we talk, it's funny because you and I talk about, long before we were both, I was working for VG, we used to talk all the time about Stratocasters, and
yeah.
And like I said, you were like, you're instrumental in introducing me to the VG magazine gang. You helped bring me in there, and I'm grateful beyond words, tell you.
Well, I appreciate that. That's great to hear. I mean, like they say, like my friend John Butcher says, a rising tide lifts all boats, and I do believe that as well.
Right. And I implore everybody out there to go and listen to Tom's music. No two songs were alike. It's almost like you really did something that few people can do, and that's just to spread it out in such a way that it's riff ridden, and then there's like really nice stuff in there. It's just beautifully the songwriting is just immaculate. It's just I implore people to go and listen to your music.
Oh, thanks so much. I mean, you can get it on all the streaming platforms, or you can go to my website tomguerra.com for the hard copy stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And if you stream it, Tom will get that check in about 8 months for $25. Yeah, I mean, who cares, right? I'd rather people listen to our stuff.
That's right. That third of a cent. Yeah, it's great.
So,
yeah.
Thank you again. Thank you so much.
Well, sounds great. Well, it's been a pleasure, Ram. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Buy That Guitar, presented by Vintage Guitar Magazine. Please support VG for all they do for guitar players like us. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment on this podcast. I'd love to hear from you at ram@vintageguitar.com. See you again next week. Bye-bye.
The official Vintage Guitar Magazine 2025 price guide has partnered with 33 of the top guitar dealers in the industry to provide the most accurate values for thousands of models. This includes electric guitars, acoustic guitars, basses, amplifiers, effects, mandolins, and banjos. Whether your instrument is an investment or simply a piece you enjoy playing, it's always helpful to know what it's worth. If you're checking out a guitar at your local shop and want to know its value before making the purchase, this guide is your go-to source for all the details. Available in both print and digital editions, you can have the guide right at your fingertips no matter where you go. Use code BUYGUITAR25 to receive 15% off the 2025 price guide when purchased directly from www.vintageguitar.com.
Offer expires February 11th, 2025.